Welcome to State Lobbying Heroes Podcast, a podcast where we delve into the careers and personal life stories of some of the best and the brightest state government relations experts. I'm your host, Deepak, CEO of Legistracker. Brian Flynn was the only child born and raised in Columbia, South Carolina. Brian was a political nerd right from childhood who loved current events. After graduating from high school, he wanted to have the discipline and the structure. So he joined the Citadel, the military college of South Carolina, where he learned two important aspects of life which stuck with him in his career: the honor code not to lie and how to respond when asked a question. After graduation, he worked on a home improvement business before being deployed to Afghanistan for a year as a military intelligence officer. Now, what happened during his deployment which triggered the start of his lobbying career path? Let's dive in to Brian Flynn's career and how he became the Senior Vice President at McGuireWoods Consulting in this next episode. Hi, Brian. Thank you so much for being on the show. I really do appreciate your time.
Of course. Glad to be here, Deepak.
Let's talk about your childhood. Where did you grow up and how was your childhood like?
So I grew up, born and raised in Columbia, South Carolina. I still live in the same zip code that I was born in. I left for a few times for school and for military stuff, but yeah. So I'm happy born and raised in Columbia, South Carolina.
Okay. And how was your childhood like? I mean, were you into politics or were you related to anyone who was into politics?
So I've always been interested in politics. I think my parents, so I was an only child. And so my parents, I would watch the news with them all the time at the dinner table. We would discuss current events. And so I was kind of a nerd when it came to politics, where, a lot of my friends had no clue who the president was. I would know who the president was, the cabinet officials and all these different things, and regardless of party. I used to love watching 60 Minutes and 2020. I mean, it was weird a little bit in that case. But so I loved current events. I loved politics, but I didn't really know much about it. But it was really more of my, I think it was a lot of my parents and my family were just, they didn't shield me from current events and politics. We just discussed the day's events and the implications of certain things. And I think that just kind of got me to be more interested in what affects those outcomes and those current events.
Okay. And your high school, I mean, were you a part of any student body organizations or anything like that?
So no, I wasn't. I ran for student body president in like the 3rd or 4th grade at elementary school.
Oh, nice.
I worked really hard. I was going to revamp the recycling program in the cafeteria, and I had this great grand plan, and I just got totally shellacked in the polls. And my mom always reminds me, I think one of the teachers came up and said, Brian, was the most prepared, had an actual plan, but Deepak, I was not a popular kid. And, I learned a valuable lesson then that you got to be popular and you got to win the votes. And hey, look, that's the same plays no matter what office you run for. So at that point, I was like, that wasn't fun. I'm very competitive by nature, so I hate losing. And so I was like, why would I ever do that? So that's no, when I was in high school, I never participated in student body elections. None of that really ever appealed to me.
Okay. So what happened after high school? You joined the Citadel, right? I mean,
so I graduated from high school. I went to the Citadel, which is a military college here in South Carolina. So my parents divorced when I was young, and I lived with my mom. And I think I probably needed some discipline. I needed some structure, and I think the Citadel kind of beckoned me to come to them. So it was the first school I visited. I went there, fell in love with it, knew it was the right place for me. So after high school, I went to the Citadel. And most of my friends, I was my senior year, I was voted like the wittiest or most funny or whatever. Like I was kind of like the class clown. Okay. So most people were like, Brian, the Citadel military? Like, what is he like? Oh, he won't make it. He won't do it. So that kind of motivated me to not quit, stay there. And of course, a lot of people, the Citadel's not for everyone, but I had a good time, and the Citadel has been was a fantastic school for me, and it's certainly done a lot more for me than I ever have for it.
So can you tell us of the experiences you had at the Citadel? Is there anything which you can remember which
a skill you gained or anything or any kind of experience which has shaped you the way you are?
So, well, two things. The Citadel has an honor code. So it's do not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. And it's certainly a code that is very stringent down there, and a code that I still live by to today. When I was at the Citadel, I served on the honor court, which is elected by my peers, two from each company. And I was in Alpha Company at the Citadel, which is kind of like each company is kind of like its own fraternity. And so I was elected by my peers to represent them on the honor court. And so at that time, we would, if someone was caught lying or cheating or stealing, we would prosecute them like a normal case, and they would have their ability to defend themselves, and we would prosecute. And then certainly I would have to, sometimes I would have to sit on the judges table. I can't remember the exact number. It was either 10 or 11 judges that would sit and that would hear the case. And so that was a meaningful experience. And then one thing that I think has stayed with me from my freshman year, which they called knobs at the Citadel. When you're a freshman or a knob, you're only allowed to say 3 answers if someone asks you a question. Yes, sir, or yes, ma'am. No, sir, no, ma'am, or no excuse. And I think that has stayed with me forever, because I feel like a lot of people, my generation, younger, older generations, they screw up, which you're bound to screw up at any point in time. You're bound to make mistakes. You're bound to forget something. Instead of blaming somebody else or blaming something else that comes up, just to say, hey, look, no excuse. My bad. I screwed up. I'm going to own it. I'm going to fix it. And there have been countless times in my life since the Citadel, and certainly even as a lobbyist, that I have told a legislator, or I have told my colleagues or people I work with, like, hey, no excuse. I screwed up. I made a mistake. I'm going to make it right. And I think that has served me well, because I think a lot of people nowadays don't want to do that. And so that's one big takeaway that I've taken away from the Citadel.
And how long was that course for?
So I went to the Citadel, graduated in 4 years. So it's a 4-year college. We joke we have the highest graduation rate at the Citadel in the state. Probably a lot of military schools are like this, because most people want to get the heck out of Dodge. They do not want to stay. No more curfews, no more uniforms, no more morning inspections. So I was not an academician. I barely got through all levels of school. And so I barely got through the Citadel. But one thing is, I knew I wanted to graduate on time. So I graduated in 4 years from the Citadel.
Sweet. So what happened after that? I see that you became an executive director. And how did you get into that? And what was your experience like?
So let me kind of think back to back to 2006 when I graduated.
Yeah, so Alliance for Main Street Fairness.
Yeah, so I need probably there's a little bit of gap between that and that position. So when I graduated the Citadel, I took a commission in the National Guard as a second lieutenant, and I was a military intelligence officer. So when I graduated from the Citadel, this was in May of 2006. That was in the prime of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, when I was scheduled and slated to go to Army school for 7. I wasn't scheduled to go to Army school for another 7 months. So when I graduated from the Citadel, I had a job with a defense contractor in DC. And a large part of that's because they knew I was going to get a top secret security clearance with the military. And so I didn't have a job for 7 months before I went to Army school. So a buddy of mine from home, who we did Boy Scouts together, I was an Eagle Scout, we started a home improvement business. And it was really just to kind of like, he had recently graduated from college. I had graduated, and we didn't really know what we wanted to do. And so we started this business. And so I did home improvement for about a year, and we made great money and enjoyed it and had a great time. And then I went to Army school out in Arizona, Fort Huachuca, for Army Intelligence School, graduated from that. And then when I was at that Army school, I kind of had an epiphany. I did not want to move to DC. And so it just felt like Columbia's home. I'm a Columbia guy. And so I wanted to move back to Columbia. So I came back and joined the home improvement business that I had started. And I did that for a couple of years, and I just kind of felt like at some point, like it just wasn't for me. I didn't enjoy the work. It just wasn't what I wanted. It wasn't what I was called to do. So then I decided I took a full-time position in the National Guard for a little bit. And then while I was doing that, that was 2009, I got called up for a deployment to Afghanistan. And so that's when I deployed to Afghanistan for about a year. And when this is kind of how the beginning, this is where my story is unique. So like I said, I've mentioned to you earlier, I never really planned to be a lobbyist. And so in life, certain things happen where certain events or certain things happen in your life that totally change the direction of your life. Well, deploying to Afghanistan was that for me. And so I was fortunate to be over in Afghanistan, did not have anything near what a lot of soldiers face over in a combat zone, but really deployed with a great group of guys, a great unit. And luckily we were able to bring everybody home from our unit, certainly my soldiers as well. But I met a guy, Chris Neely, who still is here in South Carolina as a lobbyist, but now is the head of the South Carolina Public Charter School District here. He at the time was a lobbyist for Walmart, and he was doing public affairs for our unit. So I got to know him and kind of became buddies. And he was like, Brian, he's like, I think you kind of, politics you're interested in politics. Like, I think you could have a career in this. And I was like, okay, because I didn't really have any plans after the deployment about what I was going to do. And so when we got back from the deployment, I was unemployed for a couple of months, and he called me and he said, hey, he's like, I've got a job for you that I think would be good for you. And it was to work and run this grassroots group called the Alliance for Main Street Fairness. And this was back when Amazon, so this was back in 2011. So this was back when Amazon was getting bigger, and they were putting a fulfillment center in South Carolina. And they wanted a sales tax exemption from collecting sales tax. And of course, retailers, brick and mortar retailers, were against this because it was a fairness issue. So I headed this group up, and I represented all the retailers in the state. And my job, Deepak, was to cause Amazon as much trouble as possible. And the funny part was that I was a complete unknown. So nobody knew who I was. It was like, who's this kid, Brian? Like, where did he come from? Like, why is he causing? So I'll never forget, Chris at the time was like, look, he's like, I just want you to throw grenades in Amazon's way and make their life just very difficult in South Carolina. And I was like, okay, I can have that. So coming off a deployment, like, I had a ton of fun. I was like, all right, I'll do this. I'll ruffle some feathers. I don't know what to do. I don't know what's going on here. So my job was to recruit businesses like small mom and shop retailers to say, hey, look, like, I have to collect sales tax. Why doesn't Amazon? And I would do letters to the editor. I would do op-eds. I would get media to come and interview small retailers and talk about the fairness issue. And it was a good fight. We ultimately, I think ultimately the best legislation was passed because Amazon got their sales tax exemption, but there was a sunset provision put on it. So after, I think it was like 5 or 6 years, they would have to start collecting sales tax. And as all Amazon transactions now their sales taxes collected, and most online retailers are starting to do that now. But at the time, that was a very unique issue. People still didn't fully appreciate the behemoth that Amazon would become, and the fact that a majority of transactions would start to take place online. So that was really interesting. So I did that. And then, of course, that legislation passed, and then I was kind of out of a job, which is typical in politics. And Chris and a few others and folks I had met said, hey, look, why don't you hop on some political campaigns? And I said, okay, sounds good. So at the time, Rick Perry was running for the first time for president. And so I got a job as one of his field directors in South Carolina. So did that campaign, and I learned a lot about Republican politics and campaigns when I worked on that campaign. I kind of realized pretty quickly that it was not my cup of tea. Going to party meetings and stuff like that and trying to pitch a candidate, it just was not my thing. So when that campaign ended, of course, famously when Rick Perry couldn't remember all the federal agencies he wanted to get rid of. So then I hopped off that, and then I finally got a job again. And this is how politics works. You meet people and you come around. And I got a job working for Congressman Joe Wilson in his district office, who's my congressman here in Columbia. And I worked for Joe for a number of months and learned a lot from him. And one of the things that I learned from him, and one he's very famous for, is constituent service. And that's kind of what I did for him. Was I would go around with him on campaign stops and town halls and meetings and meet with people and help work their issues. And Joe was always really good about, hey, look, like, if I have a constituent that has an issue, we got to take care of it. And so part of the reason why he is so popular in his district is that you could come to Joe with any kind of federal issue, and Joe is going to work it for you. He's going to have his staff work it. So did that for a number of months. And then, and this is kind of how politics works sometimes, I got a call from Robert Adams, who I worked with back on the Walmart fight and the Amazon fight a couple of years ago. He, at the time, was a lobbyist for the Retail Association. And I had limited interactions with Robert and always respected him and appreciated, but he obviously saw something in me. And so he called me one day and said, hey, Brian, and I hadn't talked with him in probably maybe a year and a half. And he said, hey, our lobbying firm is looking to hire a young Republican lobbyist. Are you interested? And I was like, of course. Yeah, I'm happy to. So that's kind of how I've been at McGuireWoods ever since. And Robert Adams has unfortunately passed away a couple years ago because of cancer. And he was a mentor of mine for a number of years. And I'm forever grateful that he kind of gave me a shot to get into lobbying, because it's so difficult to get your foot in the door in the lobbying world. I'm very thankful to Chris Neely, who kind of got me into politics, who saw something in me. And then I'm grateful that Robert Adams saw something in me in that campaign and said, hey, I think this guy would be a good lobbyist. And so that's kind of here I am. And that's how I got to where I am right now at McGuireWoods. And I've been here for going on 8 or 9 years.
So first off, I just wanted to say thank you for your service. I really do appreciate that. Because of folks like you and many others who are currently serving, are able to enjoy our freedom here. So thank you for doing that.
Well, yeah, it's an honor to serve. And like I said, just like the Citadel has done more for me than I have for it, the National Guard has done way more for me and my family than I've ever given back to it. And yeah, it's funny. I think about it because when I went to the Citadel, I was not planning on joining the military. That was not my plan. But when you're out of military college and you're circa 2004 and you've got the Iraq and Afghanistan wars popping, a lot of my classmates were signing on the dotted line. And so I had some family pressure. Like, my dad wanted me to join the military. My grandfather flew helicopters in Vietnam. And so there was this kind of pulling of me to join. And so when I finally signed the dotted line, I was like, oof, okay. I don't know, what did I do here? But it's been a huge blessing to serve, and I've enjoyed serving. And I've been in for going on 16 years now.
So can you tell us, like, with that experience you've had 16 years, can you tell us, like, if there was one skill, and probably there must be plenty, but if there was one skill which you gained, which you're currently using in your lobbying world, is there anything you can pinpoint? Yeah.
Military skills certainly apply to a lot of things. And I could probably melt this between the Citadel and the military. I think it's discipline and being focused. I think the military, it's all about the mission. The mission is X, and this is how you accomplish it, and here's how you plan for it. You backwards plan. I think I take that same process, apply it to when a client calls me and says, hey, I've got this issue. And I say, okay, all right, that's the mission. That's the problem. All right, now let's backwards plan. How do we attack this? How do we figure this out? How do we work around it? And so I think it's more of a mindset that I've taken away from that, from my time in the service.
Nice. So the turning point, you did mention that Chris was basically helpful in telling you, okay, go ahead and then try this option out. So of the experiences you've had at the SC Alliance and even also as a field director, working for the grassroots level, is there anything which you can say that, okay, based on that experience, I've gained the skill? Like, probably the lobbying is the other side of the coin, right? On the other side is the grassroots. So is there anything which you gained from that?
Well, yes, certainly. I think the biggest thing that I realized specifically on the campaign side of things and the grassroots efforts is the importance of that grassroots efforts. What we tell clients all the time is, sure, if you've got an issue, you need a good lobbyist, you need a good quarterback that can kind of work you through the legislative process and help you with those things. But you also need to have a good grassroots effort. And this is easier said than done. And for some companies, they interact with the public a good bit. And so they're able to cultivate a grassroots network of supporters. And then other companies, it might be more difficult because they don't really interact with the public on like a retail level. But to me, I think working on grassroots campaigns like that helped me realize the importance of it's not just having a good lobbyist, it's also having an effective grassroots campaign to really get your base of support out there, just to make phone calls and to let their legislators know, hey, like this issue is important to me. So that's the big takeaway for me.
Okay, cool. So now you're a lobbyist at McGuireWoods. Can you tell us like what kind of issues do you tackle with, and what kind of companies or clients do you handle?
Yeah. So we're a contract lobbying firm. So we represent a number of clients across all industries, from utilities to alcohol companies, transportation, education. We represent Uber and work on another many clients like that. So one of the things I like about doing contract lobbying work is that it's a new issue every day. And it's not, as an in-house lobbyist, if you were in-house at, say, a utility or a hospital, you'd have to know like healthcare law or energy law. As a contract lobbyist, I'm not really expected to be an expert on any particular issue, but know just enough to kind of fake it and get by. And when you're talking with members, so that's what I like about doing contract lobbying.
Nice. So in the past session or any recent session you've been in, was there any major policy which you've worked on which you're proud of?
Yeah. So, yeah, sure. So I think I look back, we've passed we've helped clients get a number of bills across the finish line. I think my most memorable one would be Uber, when we helped pass transportation network company legislation for them and others to operate. And that at the time, I was very new in the lobby. I think it'd been my second year in the lobby. And I remember I went to my boss and I said, hey, we had just gotten Uber as a client. And I said, hey, I've utilized this service. I know it. I think I could be helpful here. Can you help me, let me take some initiative here on this case. And my boss said, sure, well, you run point on it and we'll go from there. And so I think not so much that that's the most important piece of legislation we've ever helped our clients adopt, but it was certainly the first one that I ever worked really hard to get across the finish line. And it was a very tough bill to get across the finish line, and it passed on the very last day of session. And so that's one I will always remember because it was my first bill that I worked really hard on.
Okay. So looking back at your established career, if you had to look back and knowing that what you have known already, if you had to start all over again, what would you think would be the first step of who wants to get into lobbying? What should their first step be?
So yeah, I meet with people all the time who are like, hey, I want to get into lobbying, what do I do? I'm interested. And I said, well, certainly don't follow my route, because that would be starting a home improvement business and then going to Afghanistan. So I don't go that route. But I think for most people, if I could do it over again, I think there's really two ways to be very successful lobbyist. It's to do campaigns. If you can understand and appreciate the process or help get folks elected, that gets you where it's all about lobbying. It's all about relationships. It's all about, can you get a door open? Can you talk with somebody? And when you help elect those people into office, well, then that certainly is a good opening for a relationship. I think for me, if the best way to do it is to be a staffer on a committee or a member, either at the state or federal level, because I think you really get to know the members on a very personal level, and then you also understand the process. So when I got hired, I barely knew how a bill became a law. I mean, I tell people all the time, my knowledge was like schoolhouse rock. I mean, that was basically all I knew, how a bill became a law. So I think staffers are really well equipped because two things: they know the process, which is very important because people pay for us to know what the process is like, and then they also have those relationships with members. And staffers have the benefit when with their relationships with members, it's helping them. It's helping them with information or helping them with an issue. When I call a legislator, they're like, "Oh man, what's Brian want now?" And so when a staffer calls me, it's like, "Hey, this person's trying to help me." So I think staffers certainly have a leg up in that process for sure.
Okay. So looking back at your career, is there any funny incident or anything which you can recollect, which you thought like, oh man, I shouldn't have done that, or anything else you can recollect?
Yeah, I mean, look, I make a lot of mistakes and I screw up all the time. I try to have a sense of humor in all that I do. And I think I can't think of one particular incident that was particularly embarrassing. I'm sure folks listening to this, if they know me, would be like, oh, geez, I remember that one time Brian did X, Brian did Y. But I just try to have a good time up there at the State House. And I try to be collegial with both legislators and my colleagues in the lobby, because I feel like at the end of the day, everybody's got their issues and their clients. And I don't get too personally invested in my clients' issues. I mean, I'm super competitive. I want to win. But at the end of the day, like, a legislator is going to have his view or his or her view on a particular matter. And there's only so much I can do to convince them of that. And same with my lobbying colleagues. I mean, there are numerous instances within the lobby where I'll go against one lobbyist on one issue, and then on another issue, I'm teamed up with them to get something done. So I think it's important just to have a good sense of humor. And I hope people, they think of me, they go, all right, Brian's a laid back guy. Brian's funny. He doesn't take himself too seriously.
Excellent. So I think that's the set of questions I had. You can now take a few moments or anything you wanted to talk about yourself or McGuireWoods, or anything you would like to talk about your future aspirations or what you want to be in a few years down the road.
Sure. Well, I think I've been tremendously blessed. I love my job. I love what I do. I love lobbying. I think there are I have a lot of friends who they don't enjoy their careers. They're working late nights and they don't like it. And it's a lot of work for them. And although lobbying is a lot of work, I enjoy it. You know, I don't mind a late night. I don't mind, because it's what I do. And I'm a people person, so I like talking with people. I'm a talker. I probably talk more than most guys or talk. So I enjoy that aspect of it. In terms of, I guess the thing that would like to say, if I could say anything, is I'm just really appreciative of the opportunities that folks have given. I mentioned Chris Neely, Robert Adams, Billy Bone, and Governor Hodges, who are my two bosses here at McGuireWoods. I mean, I was an unknown. I mean, they didn't know me from Adam's house cat, and they saw something in me and were willing to give me a shot. And I will always be forever grateful for that, because they didn't have to. They didn't know who I was. I don't have any family in politics. I really am. Most people, I mean, just if you're in this business, you've got some type of family connection to it, or you were around it a lot as a kid, and I was really none of that. And so if I could say one thing, I'm appreciative of those folks seeing something in me and willing to give me a shot. And it's something that, I hope one day I can be in the same position where I see somebody and I say, you know what, I see something in that kid. He reminds me of me. Like, I'm going to give him a shot, or I'm going to help somebody get a job somewhere. Because I think at the end of the day, all that stuff comes back full tilt.
Excellent. Great piece of advice. Now we are on to the rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Part of it. So if you're ready, we'll shoot for it.
Okay. I'll try to act really smart and wise with all my answers.
All right. Good luck then. What is the one myth or misconception about lobbying?
What's the biggest misconception about it? I think that people think that we go around and all we do is booze and smooze and hand out checks, and none of that is true. Certainly not in South Carolina. So I think that's the biggest misconception.
Okay. What are the 3 skills you think are essential for someone to be a good lobbyist?
I think you have to be a people's person. You have to not be afraid of conflict or working through that. I think a lot of times for my clients, I feel like I act as a mediator between their issue and the folks working against them, or their issue and a legislator. So a lot of times I feel like I'm bringing people together, and I'm like, hey, is there a way we can compromise? Is there a way we can get this? So I think if you don't like conflict or talking through conflict, I think you would find this to be a very unnerving job. And I think, I guess lastly, is just kind of, knowing that you can't win every fight. There are times where, I think the lobbyists that are the most successful are the ones that are super competitive. They want to win. They want to get something done for their client. But at the end of the day, you're going to take some losses. And it's, what do you do with those losses, and how do you learn from them, and how do you grow from them, I think are the 3 biggest takeaways.
Okay. What would you be if you weren't a lobbyist?
Oh man, that's I don't know. I think either there have been some kind of career in the military, maybe with that, or I think when I did remodeling and the home improvement stuff, I enjoyed owning my own business. So I think there's probably either a career in the military or owning my own business.
What is your favorite book or hobby?
Well, I don't really have a favorite book per se, but I have a genre. So I like reading thriller novels that deal with military, of course, as you would imagine. So anything with like Cold War, CIA, World War II, like terrorism, that kind of stuff. I enjoy reading those things. Those are fun. In terms of a hobby, I feel like I don't have many, except for being a dad at this moment.
Excellent. That's a great hobby. Do you have any role models in your life?
Oh, well, many role models. A few I've already mentioned. I think both my parents would be a role model. Certainly, I wouldn't be where I am today without their work ethic and their raising me in the right way. My grandfather on my mom's side played a big role. I mentioned him earlier. He flew helicopters in Vietnam. He went to Clemson University here in South Carolina back when it was a military school. It was an all-male military school back in the 50s. And so he had a lot of influence on me. And then I think, career-wise, I look at Robert Adams, who recently passed away, Billy Bone, and Governor Jim Hodges have been really big mentors for me and have influenced my life in a great deal.
Excellent. Finally, the last question. What inspires or motivates you to be doing what you're doing currently?
I like to win. I'm very competitive. I've been competitive all my life in everything I've done. And so client comes to me and says, hey, I have this issue. I kind of instantly put on like their hat and I'm like, all right, let's do this. Let's get this win. Let's get this fixed. And so in terms of what motivates me, that's what I love most about my job is helping folks. Because sometimes, like all things, you just need somebody who knows the way to navigate certain things. And that's what our clients pay us to do, is to help them navigate them through the government process. And that's what I enjoy doing. That's why I continue to wake up every day and want to come to McGuireWoods and be a lobbyist.
Perfect. That's a great way to end this show. Thank you so much, Brian, for being on the show. I really do appreciate your time.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Deepak.
I am so grateful for this opportunity to host these wonderful guests on the show. Thank you so much for listening and supporting this cause to raise awareness on state government relations. Take care until next time.